Hey, everybody, welcome to another edition of the One Step Better podcast. I'm Mike Schaefer, and with me is Matt Patrick. Matt, you doing well today?
Glad to be back. Glad to be on, as always.
Yeah, you've been on vacation here for not vacation in quotes, right? You've been away from the office, away
from the office and working.
So welcome back.
My kids got to spring break. I get to watch my kids' spring break while I worked.
Yeah, that's
okay.
It's all fun of being an accountant during the spring. So, well, welcome back. I'm glad that you are back and ready to overload you with all of the work that you've missed from being away. So,
yeah, can't wait.
Well, our question for the day is, are you a backseat driver?
Of course, yeah. Got the 18-year-old now. I definitely backseat drive her terribly bad. And then when Mandy drives, it's the constant, why are you going this way versus that way? Or, hey, don't, you're going too fast. Or why are we, going 800 mile an hour around that truck? Or Mandy has this pet peeve of there's a car in front of her that she cannot see around. No matter how fast it's going, she has to go in front of it. She cannot be behind that car.
So like the eke out a little bit and then jet back in if there's a car coming.
No, she's like Mario Andretti. She just kind of goes.
Yeah.
Yeah. My dad calls her Mandy Andretti.
I don't like being behind a car that I can't see around. I like to be able to see everything that's in front. And so if there's like a big rig in front of me, I got to get around that car just so
The other thing that Mandy always does when she drives is she always is playing the license plate game, like where she always has a list on her desk, on her car, where she writes down the license plates.
Yeah.
Every day it's a goal for her to get to some certain number. This is just a normal commute thing for her. And I'm like, seriously? Every day? Like, every day she does it. Like, she's like on a trip, she's like, I'm going to get 35 or I'm going to get 23 or whatever it is. I'm like, I don't care.
This is
so, other than that.
And she's going to find all the different license plates.
13. Yep.
That's awesome.
Yep. Every day. That's her game. She plays against herself.
My kids do that whenever we go anywhere and they see a license plate. It is always, you got to call it out. And then you can find the most.
Right.
We did that growing up. That was fun. Are you in a position to be a backseat driver often? Do you ever sit in the passenger seat? Or are you mostly driving?
On trips, Mandy drives if we're together most of the time. I usually work in the car. Now with my middle daughter's driving and Mallory's driving, I often sit in the back seat and let Mandy sit in the passenger seat. Then I hold on with both hands and close my eyes. No, I don't really. They're both good drivers. Actually, they're both very good drivers. I'm very lucky so far. Mallory's had a couple traffic incidents, but really nothing on her fault. And it's been pretty good. And Maddie's been a good driver so far. So we'll see. Maddie turns 16 here in a couple months. So we'll find out.
It's growing up quick.
Scary. Very scary.
Growing up fast. I'm not a vocal backseat driver, but in my head, man, I'm tearing that person apart. Like, why are we not stopping? Why are we not stopping? Why are we not stopping? Oh no, you need to turn left. A lot of times, if Meredith's driving, and like we start to park somewhere, I always try to give her a hard time, tell her not to park there. You go park somewhere different, just to goof off a little bit. But I'm not typically a vocal backseat driver, which I think is helpful. Now, the people that
I'm a vocal backseat driver. I'm constantly pumping the brakes. My dad is the worst. He drives like 7 miles an hour. So I'm always like, go, the lady on the walker just passed us. Come on. So,
no doubt.
We're never going to get there.
No doubt.
Of course, he's a guy who's never had a speeding ticket, never had a driving accident. He goes like 7 miles an hour at all times. So
ever. Your dad. Wow. That's impressive.
Yeah, it's pathetic. It's pathetic. No, it's pathetic. He should have one by now. He's really old.
He needs to go get out and just floor it. Just go try to get a ticket. Why not? That's probably bad. Why we shouldn't sanction that advice officially.
Probably not.
Well, back driving is always fun. except for the person that's actually behind the wheel. And
I hate it when I'm driving and somebody's backseat driving, by the way.
it drives me nuts, drives me insane. Oh, you need to slow down. No, I need to drive exactly how I'm going to drive, and you need to shut up or get out of the car.
Hold on and close your eyes.
Right. That's right. Well, that's fun. What I want to talk about today is a little bit about some of the things that we actually do well, and help our clients do well, and that is making their processes related to their employees a little more efficient, a little more effective. If you think about any time a business decides to bring on that first employee, they're bringing on, hopefully, both in their minds and the employee's mind, a very productive, future-oriented outcome. Everything is going to be great, and there's a lot of positivity around that. But at the same time, there's a lot of headache and just burden that comes with having that employee. Everything from having to pay that person to having to have the cash behind the scenes to pay the person, having work that they have to do. All of those types of things are a bit of a burden for a small business leader, but a burden that is welcome because they know that it's going to provide a lot more future dividends, hopefully, to be paid. But one of the things that comes with that specifically is there's a bunch of systems in which that person has to get set up in, they have to learn, they have to manage. And the employer sometimes doesn't always want to find the easiest way to do that or what's the most effective way to do that. And not because they aren't interested in doing things great, but a lot of times they just don't know what is available, what is possible, and what really can be done to make their systems and processes of bringing on people a lot more efficient. So I want to talk a little bit about everything from, bringing on new hires, the way in which that can be done, the way in which you can manage your employees, and kind of the back office paperwork, clerical burden of having employees, all the way through. Let's say that somebody is going to ride off into the sunset and retire down the path. So Matt, talk to me a little bit about, from your experience having employees and bringing on employees back, 10, 15 years ago in the early days. What did that look like for you as a business owner? What were you really concerned about with bringing on that one or even that fifth, 10th employee?
Yeah. The first fear is always that you'll hear from every owner is, can I afford this next person? Does the math make sense for me to hire this person now? Do I have the amount of work for them to do? Can I afford the cash flow hit? How long before they're up and running? And then the second problem becomes, okay, how am I going to get them trained and onboarded as fast as possible and being a productive part of the team? Because obviously your goal is to get them up and running and helping you make more money, or being better at what you guys do already. And so that's usually the first burden that came to mind on my end.
Whenever you are looking out and thinking about that first hire, let's say that you're just a micro business that is getting up and running. What are you looking at? What are you thinking about from a cash flow perspective? Is now the time to bring somebody else on? Can I afford that? What are some metrics that you're looking to be considering?
Well, ideally, I would have been saving up what I would expect to pay their salary for a little bit before I have to hire them. Or I would have projected out revenue that they're going to generate and how fast, or I would have projected out, how our cash reserves are already. But what I'm really doing now is just figuring out, okay, what's the incremental cost going to be to our payroll early on to when we bring on one of those people? And do we have the revenue and the cash flow to absorb that both short term and then long term, knowing how fast it's going to take them to get up to speed? And then from there, once that happens, how much revenue can they produce or generate for us?
Yeah.
It's hard. It's hard on the very beginning, though, to understand what those numbers look like. You don't even know what they're going to do. Also, you start figuring the math on what a hire cost. Like, okay, it could take me 2, 3, 6 months for this person is fully productive. And then it's going to cost me inefficiencies on my own. So there's just a kind of a little bit of a math equation, but also a little bit of you've got to do some projections out, some planning that you thinking through all the what if scenarios.
When you brought on your first non-family employee, was that a scary moment?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we had my first not family employee was a lady by the name of Sue Blows, a longtime family friend, but um, not a family member. It was I'm still kind of at that point thinking. I think like this for previous podcast, which was they're going to do work for me, help me get my work done, and so it was a part-time hire. We did it on an hourly basis, so I had a good understanding what they were going to be doing, and it made it pretty easy for me to understand my math. I had the revenue already generated, but it was still a very big, very big responsibility. My first full-time, I'll say full-time employee, the lady named Tracy Penland, was my first real accountant I hired. And the math there problem was that I had not done a good job understanding what her expectations were as far as production goes. She was a great employee, but this is 2004. And I have no idea what my revenue even looks like. Might as well would have agreed not to pay somebody, which was basically a little bit more than I was actually making myself. And so it didn't make a ton of sense at the time. Tracy actually helped us with a lot of early processes in the practice that we still use today, but it quickly became apparent that we were paying her entirely too much money for the amount of work that she was able to produce. Not on any part of her end. We just didn't have the revenue yet to generate to give her.
Yeah, that's always a scary place to be. Even if you're that new hire coming in and it's a one person business or two person business, you have to be able to look around and think, man, this is a different different story than if I'm going to go work at FedEx or UPS, some big conglomerate of a company. Working at small businesses is very different than working at at large businesses.
Yeah, there's a lot less security working at Patrick Accounting in 2004 than there was probably working at FedEx or even McDonald's or whatever. There's a lot more security in a lot of other places for sure. I didn't even figure out what we were selling yet. Might as well, why I'm hiring somebody. I just know that I had a bunch of work to do and I couldn't do it all in a day. I didn't even know the math yet. Getting to employee 10, an employee to, if I get to employee 30 now where we're at, or if we go up and get bigger, to be trying to find the employees that at employee 10, it was still they're probably wearing multiple hats. What can they all do for our practice that we need them to do? Some of our most strategic hires were hiring, ideal bookkeepers or ideal managers, hiring our first salesperson. So Rick was hired 2007 or 8. He was my first salesperson. We did find a role for him, but it was still that was a gamble for him. He had come from corporate America. And so understanding all those risks on his end, he was at a place in his career where he was looking for something that he could probably stay with till he retires. And I'm trying to figure out at the same time going, I wonder if I can sell accounting services. So kind of those are not necessarily the same spot. But yeah, it worked out great. He's still here, 12 plus years later. But employee 10, I'm still worried about cash flow. I'm still worried about the same math. So the same math is, okay, how fast can they get up and producing? Can I afford to hire this next person? And so
I think it's safe to say that whenever you're bringing on people, there are a lot of things that you have to consider from the sustainability of, can I support this person? Is it going to make sense to bring them on board? Do they have the work? Do we have the revenue? All of those types of things. And so the more that we have to think about as we're bringing on people, the better it is to have some systems in place to not have to think about some other things. And so one of the areas that we see a lot of businesses struggle to make efficient is the actual hiring process. So let's pretend like we've already decided, hey, you know what, we need to bring on, let's say a sales manager, whoever it is. We need to bring on a person. The process by which we bring that person on can be an efficient and somewhat automated process. And whenever we can start to systematize that process, there's going to be things that are taken off your plate in a way that you can really start to think about some of the things that matters. So Matt, whenever you started to bring on those people early on, whenever it was, hey, this is a family friend, and it's a pretty easy, what did that look like from a systems standpoint? Like, there's a lot of paperwork that you have to gather. There's a lot of, how did you go about that?
First of understanding what roles we're trying to find. So we have to write an ad, or if we're going to place a hire that's not a family friend, it's okay, we have to put an ad somewhere. What is that process going to be like? So, we may have done research. We may send email out to friends or family or someone to say, hey, do you know somebody does this? But we still have to figure out who we're trying to hire. And then from there, it's all the stuff that, when you hire an employee, you have got, obviously your onboarding paperwork. So getting all their tax stuff set up, their W-4, their, making sure that they're valid and eligible to work. That's I-9 stuff. But then also making sure you set up the right policies for their PTO if you have that, or what's health insurance looks like, what's your retirement offering going to be. All those things, trying to figure out what you're going to be offering in the very beginning is how do you competitively hire people? Then from there is making sure you actually get those things actually enrolled. So like, yeah, I got your benefits, but I forgot. I was supposed to send you this before. Oh crap, now the date's already passed. Life events have happened, or I have all that stuff on me as an employer. I had to figure out what I need to do and when. In the beginning, that paperwork is just, you've never really handled it before and you don't really know what you're doing. And you kind of have to figure it out and use all the resources at your hands. But, and then you have to go about, we had to create a handbook in the very beginning. Like, what does that look like? What do we want our policies to be? What are our hours of operation? Even that little stuff like that. So,
yeah, there's even from there, it's like, well, what am I supposed to even have in my handbook? Okay, I know
right.
that I need, look, it probably makes sense to say we're going to be open from, 9 to 5.
8 to 5. Yeah.
And then from there, it's, well, what else do I not know? That's to me always is the scary part when it comes to hiring, or even just having employees in general. There's always the fear of missing out. We've talked about that before in our FOMO podcast, but there's a fear of, I don't know what I don't know. And since I don't know it, I don't know it. And I don't even know what right. question, where to start. That's where these systems are really helpful. On my end, where we see, I get to deal with lots of small businesses in their hiring process, and I see everything from one-page application that is, essentially, do you have a pulse? Do you have a name? Do you have an address? And maybe you should tell me your social security number. Everything from that side of things to, here's a 50-page packet of information that you need to fill out before you even are considered for a job. That's probably a bit of an overstatement, but the spectrum there that small businesses have on the gathering of data, paperwork on their new hires or even their existing employees is extremely broad. Whenever you found yourself in the situation of, I know that I have to do something. I know there's some things that I need to get, but you didn't really know everything. Where did you reach out? Where did you go to figure out those answers, or even the questions that you didn't even know you needed to ask yet?
I'm a little bit unique, probably coming from a tax background than other employers. So I had an understanding on the tax pieces. I had an understanding on my paperwork needs. As far as handbook goes, we initially did that through a service called HR Answer Leak, which was a third-party service that we used to offer here at Patrick Payroll. But also I had to go out and reach out to peers, and I learned a lot through, going to events and asking people, and I called an attorney, and we never have hired a payroll company because we are a payroll company, but that's kind of where that process came from. Like, there's got to be a better way. Now today I think through it, like, we have 30 employees. It's still a challenge. We hired an employee today. It's still the challenge of, do we have the computer equipment here? Do we have training set up? Do we have people ready to train? Do we have people, our benefits lined up and ready to go? And so that they're going to be enrolled on the right time. That's all the things that we want to build into our processes. What do we need to do before they're hired? So between when we're recruiting them to an offer, to once we've made an offer and they've accepted, between that date and their start date, there's all kinds of stuff that we have to get done in between those. So that's the part that becomes a challenge today.
And we've had, we talked a little bit about this in our podcast before, but now we have some systems in place to do those things, make it a lot easier. We use an applicant tracking system where we are posting job ads. Everything is through that system, where we have a single person that is kind of coordinating all of the next steps and what that looks like, all the way from applicant to hire. that transition then happens from an applicant to an employee. And so there's a compliance piece that comes with, this is the data that we have to have on our applicants, and we have to keep that for so many years. This is the information that we have to have on our employees. We have to keep that for so many years. Having a system in place to track all of that information is extremely, extremely important. It doesn't matter if you hire 50 people a year or 5 people a year or 0.5 people a year. That standardization in that system and in that process will save you a lot of time, and it'll allow you to check some boxes that you didn't even know needed to be checked, just simply because that system is going to do some of that work for you.
Right. So where we are right now is we want to always be recruiting. And so in order to make that possible, we have to have job ads kind of always going on. And we're at the stage now that we probably will hire 6 to 10 people a year. And, that's one every other month. And so making sure their ads are fresh and live in all the right spots. But then also we want to make sure that if we're always recruiting, that we're always looking at those. So we have to have some metrics and the systems available to go through those applications as efficiently as possible, have us rate them on both some just generic stuff that's, mission critical for us to have, then have the processes followed in a consistent manner. All of our pre-screening tests are done through the applicant tracking system, and it's going to hundreds of job boards at all times. So it's hitting all the big ones, and it also hits college job boards, and you can run ads on it, all kinds of stuff like that. So it allows you to keep getting fresh applicants in. And part of the game is just really in our world, just keeping the funnel open. And I'm sure that's a lot of people that are same size is probably similar to that. If you're even bigger, it's even more active. You have to be, I'm assuming you're having to replace people and or keep growing even at a more rapid pace. We also interact with recruiters as well, and that interaction still goes through our system. So we're still able to see, once they have a candidate, we're going to make them take tests through our system. So it allows us to have consistency there.
Yeah, one of the more frustrating parts on my end is once we do make a hire and that person is an employee, we have multiple systems in which that person has to get set up. I mean, in the different just software programs that we use, there has to be user accounts created, and there are a ton of them. If you think even about like a restaurant, if you bring somebody on and they get hired, well, that information most likely go to payroll. It needs to go to their point of sale system. It needs to go to their scheduling system. There's multiple places in which those employees have to get set up in order for everything to function correctly. What are your, that's been the case for us for years, where there's multiple systems that those employees, that data has to get set up. Have you found any ways to make that process a little bit easier?
We have a master checklist. We use a program called Count to manage onboarding when it comes to technology onboarding. When we bring an employee on after they've been hired through our payroll system and they've onboarded through that, we track all kinds of things, what we've given them as far as assets and stuff as well through that system. But the actual application management, we're getting them, one of the pieces of software that we use here is a program called Count, and that allows us to put them through a workflow of here's all the technology that to be signed up for, here's all the apps to get them plugged into, and that's allowed us to kind of have that tracking, and we actually can see who's going to be doing that, who did it. We used to use Excel, and we still, we used to use Excel basically to track those things. From there, it becomes, getting them plugged into our Learn system, the learning management system, where they can actually learn how to use those technologies that we're actually adding them onto. And so, connecting, making sure they're in them is one. And then from there, and day one, day two, literally is just grabbing their phone and putting as many apps on it as we can possibly do, and are getting them on, confirming they're set up in all the different apps that they need to have here. And then from there, it's, like I said, it's, scheduling training.
Yeah, there's always had that fear of, all right, so I've gotten them set up in these 9 different places, but I'm sure there's one that's missing. Those checklists were super helpful for that. But even then, you have, that checklist applies for every position except for that one that we just now created. And now there's these other things that have to get done. It's a constantly evolving scenario where it's, what did I miss? And this is not, we're not perfect at this by any means, but it has gotten
No,
significant over the years to where there is some standardization there.
any kind of automation of that, we've looked at, we're actually talking to some IT companies now, and part of their talk discussion is onboarding. But it's funny is they only do SaaS-based applications. That's great. And the SaaS-based applications are very important, and we have a lot of those. But we have a lot of them are not SaaS-based applications still to get set up. So it's a combination of the two that it becomes a challenge. You have to get the timing of getting an email address set up in order to create the SaaS application so that they will give you an email to send you an email to such. So it's like this big circular equation you have to go through. Or to have an email address up, we'd have somebody on our server. All those things have to get done ahead of time. Luckily, we've got Mandy, and Mandy does a great job of making sure everybody's set up on the front end. And we just kind of make sure we block time to do every training. That's the hardest part is getting somebody on our board is onboarding them.
Yeah. That's the one thing that I do appreciate about the systems that we do use, specifically in ISOL, what we actually sell here. The ability to have a single employee database that can handle everything related to payroll, timekeeping, HR, learning management, applicant tracking, onboarding, all of that in one spot does help reduce a lot of the between multiple systems to do something like, I need to go get them signed up for this, training series on how to use QuickBooks in our world or whatever it may be. And so that system to be in place where there's, I have one primary spot. This is my master system that can then push that information to other places is super helpful. And it helps keep those checklists down to where now I don't have to remember, all right, I got them set up for payroll, but now I need to go put them in my time clock. Well, if you're using a single point system for stuff like that, then it eliminates those needs. And that does make things, anything that we could take off our plate, especially in the onboarding of employees, is helpful.
The automation of getting them set up for benefits, tracking that there's time and notifying the benefit carrier, notifying me that we need to contact the benefit carrier, or, hey, it's the 90,
yeah,
this step has to happen. The if this, then that step part of it is really great.
The eligibility piece, like you mentioned, in our world, our benefits are effective first of the month following 30 days. I think it's 30 days. I don't have to remember that though, because I have that set up system that at the appropriate time, an email triggers to that new hire to say, you're now eligible for benefits. Here's all the benefit plans that we offer. Go in and check the boxes on what you want to elect. And we have our, summaries of benefits and coverages and all that type of stuff. PTO is the same way. Whenever you become eligible for PTO, it's automatically applied based on the rules. So having that rules-based system is, like you mentioned, it's super helpful because we don't have for those things. When it comes to, the end of the life of the employee, end of the I shouldn't say end of the life, end of their tenure at the company, whether that is voluntary or involuntary, that maybe we'll be positive here. So let's say that they've worked for us for 50 years and they're going to set on to retire. What, that's a different, the offboarding sequence is in some ways just as important that onboarding, because there's still stuff that has to get done. We have to make sure that for our employees that are leaving, we are turning off that same access that we were so diligent about making sure it got set up in the first place. Whether that's email or internal communications or third-party software, whatever it may be. There's also you have COBRA continuance that you may have to worry about it, depending upon the different circumstances and size and all that type of stuff. This is another area in which systems can be super helpful to make sure those things happen in the most effective, most efficient manner possible. Matt, have you ever gotten burnt by not turning off something for an employee that you should have? Have you?
Yeah, absolutely. We've paid for health insurance benefits. Usually is the one that most people have that happen. It happened to us as well. Before we had, I saw the system we use today through Works. We were using our, manual abilities to make sure people get their insurances turned off, and it had been like 3 months since they'd left, and we just kept happily paying for health insurance for that employee who was no longer here. That's happened a couple times. The other one we had is supplemental benefits through AFLAC or Allstate at the time, I think. And I think it was a year and a half that we paid for those before we realized they're no longer with us. Those were very small dollars, but still, it's just we throwing money out the drain, down the drain.
Yeah, I think the average healthcare premium for a family is a little bit over $700 a month. So if you think about you missed out for a couple months, and that's not good. Not good at all.
No, it's not good at all. No, it's not. Another thing that what I really like what we're doing now, when we offboard somebody, is our asset tracking. It's the biggest, actually. It makes me truly know what we gave them. People working remotely. People have taken monitors from the office home. When they do that, we have to put them into our asset tracker, and that allows us to know if they have a key card, a key, a credit card. We put everything on there that we give an employee, from a cell phone, iPad. It really has helped us track those things and make sure that we get our assets back, or let us know that we're going to give them. If it's an old phone or something, we've actually given those out. Let them just keep it. But it is one of the things we have to make sure that we know where everything went.
Yeah, no doubt. That's super important. I always like to think about this as, if there is anything that touches your employee files or can touch your employee files, then we need to be involved in that conversation at works. Whether that is, I have, an iPad to hand out, or even non-physical assets like, security codes or whatever it may be, then we need to be involved in that conversation. And that conversation is simple as this: Hey, Mike, I'm thinking about, giving my employees all iPads. Can you help with that? With tracking that, or what that may look like? You may never think about Works as a company that's going to help with those items, and that's just not true, because hey, I'm giving out iPads. Why does that affect payroll? But what we're doing on our end is beyond just that payroll piece and full HR management and systems and whatnot. So we want to make your life as easy as we possibly can. And one of the ways that we do that is providing some of those systems and processes, so that you don't have to spend a bunch of time thinking about, well, did I give Sally that iPad or not? Well, if we're tracking that appropriately, when it comes time to offboard Sally, we have a full list of what she may or may not have. It makes that easier. And so anytime that you're thinking about, well, I need to add this system to my library and it's going to have employees in it in some way, let's have a conversation, because we can set up feeds that may export your employee data in a way that can be read through other systems. Same thing is true on the import side. If you have a third-party applicant tracking system for some reason, then let us know, and we can look at ways in which we can tie those systems together. Point of sale systems, where you're having to have employees set up. If you're a restaurant and they're punching time in your point of sale, well, think about, your employee data has to get to that point of sale for them to punch time. And then once they punch time, that information has to get back to our systems for payroll purposes. And so let's have a conversation around that, because there's most likely a really efficient way in which we can move that data. And so we want to have a conversation.
Well, tied isn't even that. So if you start thinking about that question of, if I given somebody an iPad, that should trigger an HR question. So all those things are going to be tied to that same employee. Anything that's touching your employee is the idea here, because, hey, now I'm giving a device. How's that device going to be used at home? Are their child going to pop on that iPad? Are they going to download an app that they shouldn't have? What's going to happen when they, what's the appropriate use rules you have? So that's tied to anything that you give an employee, both physical or even, policy related. That's what we're here for. Yeah.
And even, to expound upon that further, do you have a policy in your handbook for those devices, to where their kids can't be, popping on and downloading PBS Kids or Disney Junior and, watching video? Those are all things that need to have a conversation, because you need to have some systems and plans around what that looks like. And so ultimately, big picture, we want to help you engage with your employees in the most effective way possible. We want to help you manage those employees, and especially their information, their data, in the most efficient way possible, so that you can become the most effective leader of your organization. Remember, we're here to help you get one step better, and having data in multiple systems in multiple places that are all not talking to each other is not a great way to get one step better. So let us have that conversation and spur you on in the right direction to make that possible.
quick question, Mike. What are some ways you see when you hear people are doing things maybe inefficiently? What are some of the common things that people have that come up, like when you're talking to them?
Inefficient processes is typically around timekeeping in a lot of ways. If I only have 1 or 2 hourly employees and everybody else is salaried, then I just, they're going to put their time on an Excel spreadsheet and send it to me. That's, normally they're just sending me an email to say that they worked 8 hours today. That type of stuff, like, man, that there's better ways to do that. PTO policies is probably one of the biggest places that I see a lot of inefficiency, where companies develop really complex PTO policies that gets to a simple answer. So, I may have, my PTO policy may be, if you're here from 3 to 6 months, then you're going to get 20 hours a year, unless it's raining outside and the grass is the level of detail I see in PTO policies is normally, I would say 90% of the time, not helpful for the employer or the employee. And it would be a lot simpler just to say, you're going to get X hours for every hour worked over the course of the year, whatever it may be. And we can help you develop that. That's a big one that I see a lot of inefficiencies on. Another one is the hiring process, where even the crazy thing is, even for employers that I see that are, mass hirers, where they're bringing on 30, 40 people a year, they do it in a way that is just highly inefficient. And it turns into, all right, this is the W-4 for that employee. Well, yeah, but it's not filled out at all. Well, yeah, but that's what they gave me. That's great. There's a compliance burden that comes with new hire onboarding, that you have to have paperwork completed, and there's even rules around how it's completed. And so if you don't do that, then you're not truly in compliance. Now, I'm not saying that the Department of Labor is going to come knocking on your door tomorrow and take you to jail, but under audit, you could have some issues with those things. And so having a standardized process like our electronic onboarding, to where it doesn't allow new hires to submit incomplete packets of information, is incredibly important, especially if you have a relatively new HR team, or if your HR team is fully, second hat people, where I'm the office manager and also I deal HR, or I'm the owner that, has nothing to do with HR, but I also do HR. Then those types of companies, those types of people, they need those systems in place, so they don't have to worry about, did my new hire actually do their stuff correctly, because systems won't allow you to do it incorrectly. So those are probably the top 3 issues that I see, where there's just highly inefficient, and it's our job to try to fix those.
I think of paper. It's one of the things I think of right away when I think of it. And I also think about the simple thing is the old school thing of direct deposit. People are not taking advantage of the rules of their power and telling their employees how they're going to be paid. A lot of states allow you to dictate how you're going to pay your employees. You can say, we're going to pay you via direct deposit or a pay card. You have to have an alternative method, but that paperless way of paying people creates a huge efficiency for you, and also saves you a bunch of money when it comes to how you're going to get that physical check in the hands of the employee. What happens? How that employee going to go cash that check? You can do that on your time. They're going to do that during lunch breaks. Just super inefficient. And so that inefficiency is costing you money.
Yeah. Anytime paper is involved, there's typically a conversation that needs to happen on why that's the case. Sometimes paper does change hands, but it's pretty rare. In today's world, it's pretty. And so absolutely. Well, if you're out there listening and you have some issues, and you already know that your processes aren't the most efficient, they're not the most effective for either your new hires or your team, your people, your employees, or yourself as the employer, let us have a conversation around that. We would love to talk to you about ways in which we can make that better. Would love nothing more than that. Matt, we do have one follow-up question from our last podcast. So last week we were talking about how to find the good from the bad, and trying to keep a positive attitude. Question came in. It said, essentially, if I have somebody on my team that just never, ever, ever can see the good from the bad, they're just a Debbie Downer. How do I coach that person up? How do I manage that person that's just always going to be, the rain cloud?
That's super hard. I think it starts with having a very direct and honest conversation with that person that, hey, I understand, change is hard, or you're going through a tough time, or you're just, you don't want to acknowledge that we're trying to do things better around here, but your attitude is bringing the team down, and that can't be something that we're going to have around here. The eternal pessimist is what I think of here, the Debbie Downer. It's important that you address it right away and coach it up and be very direct about it. Coach them up, or counsel them out. I think it's one of those two things, because it's going to spread like a virus. It's a cancer in your organization that can rapidly spread. I don't know if everybody's ever worked next to the person who's complaining all the time. I hate this job, or whatever. Next thing you know, everybody in that whole area is saying the same thing. Now you have a virus. And so it's something you have to address right away.
Yeah, you mentioned it. Nobody wants to work with that person, especially, I say nobody. Other Debbie Downers want to work with that person because they can complain about everything under the sun together. But
right.
No, A players don't want to work with that person. It's just not a healthy environment. And so at some point you may just have to say, look, this is not going to get any better, and we got to move on. It is, I'll just say, for the leader, it is incredibly discouraging whenever you have a person on your team that is constantly trying to bring people down. And it's not even they're not necessarily having a bad attitude from the standpoint of they're talking about other people or anything like that, but just the constant, oh, well, I got to go do this again, or man, that got to go call this client, or, whatever it may be. Just that mood, that attitude is just draining. I think about this, like Hudson right now, my 6-year-old, he is in a phase where nothing positive can happen. We could be on our way to Disneyland and, oh, this is boring. I don't like driving. I want to get out of the car. It's like, man, you're about to be at Disneyland, and this is this is your attitude. And it's just so just draining. You got to get that person. With Hudson, it's not a matter of coaching them up or getting them out.
Coach them out, Mike. Coach them out. Just coach them out. Yeah, get rid of them.
All right,
no, I think
grandparents. See you later, man.
Yeah, I think it's I think there's positivity and negativity are both super contagious. So make sure you're trying to make sure, as a leader, being positive is super important, but also make sure people you're having with are also positive and reinforcing it.
Yeah. Promoting the right atmosphere is super helpful. Well, Matt, thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate it. If you guys are out there listening, thank you for giving us 30-ish, 45 minutes of your day, however long it is. We really appreciate it. If you could help us out by clicking on that subscribe link, that way you don't ever miss an episode of our podcast. Or give us a rating, send us a comment. We would love to hear from you, whether this is something that we're doing well, we could do better, whatever it may be. Or if you have a question about any of the stuff that we're talking about, let us know. You can reach us at onestepbetter@patrickaccounting.com, or you can just leave a comment wherever you listen to the podcast, or even on YouTube. We respond to those pretty quickly. So let us know how we're doing. Thanks, everybody, and have a great day.